The A54 is the better phone, but how much better is it when compared with the A34? Well, let's answer that together. Both phones look similar. They've both got that flagship Samsung look with the floating cameras, but you notice that the cameras on the A34 are shorter, so they don't stick out as much as on the A54. The A54 also has a glass back, while the A34's rear is plastic. The glass back on the A54 definitely feels more premium in the hand and does a better job of feeling and looking like a flagship. But there might be an argument that glass is not as durable as plastic and also costs more to be repaired. But with plastic, you don't have such worries. So you kind of have to decide, do you like premium flagship looking, or are you unbothered because you plan on slapping on a case anyway? Another thing to consider is the notch on the A34. It's a U-shaped notch, which is very old-fashioned and doesn't at all fit a $300 phone. The bezels on both phones are about the same, and we can say that about the displays as well. They're both 1080p 120Hz AMOLED displays. They're of different sizes though, with the A34 being slightly bigger. So the next question is, does the notch bother you? So far we've looked at stylistic differences, and although important, I think the next two categories would determine which phone you get. Starting off with performance, the A54 on paper supposedly has the better chipset. But when I ran benchmarks on both phones twice, the A34 had significantly better single-core scores, while the A54 had slightly better multi-core scores. I was taken aback, but putting benchmarks to the side, what did I notice? Well, you can't tell. I used both and they both felt really smooth and quick. In this region, the A34 only comes with 6GB of RAM, but you can go up to 8GB on the A54. So although the difference in power and multitasking isn't that wide, we still kind of have to give it to the A54. When it comes to gaming, they're also on par, but in some games the A34, which is the cheaper phone, is actually better. The A54 uses an Exynos processor, while the A34 uses a MediaTek processor, and it seems like some games are more optimized for MediaTek processors than Exynos. So yes, in some games the A34 has a slight advantage, maybe slightly better graphic settings or a slightly higher frame rate. It's usually a very small difference, but it's worth pointing out. So what's the takeaway? The A54 supposedly is the better performer, but in real-world day-to-day use, the difference is minimal. And then for gaming, the A34 would give you a slight advantage in some games. So far, it's been kinda close, but let's see if that's the case with the cameras. These days, numbers don't really matter, but I went into this camera comparison thinking the A54 would come out on top. And it did. The A34 though put up a good fight. It most of the time matched the A54 in quality, but like I mentioned in the review, the A34 isn't as consistent, especially when dealing with skin tones. It has this over-processed look, but with the A54, it nails it 9 times out of 10. Even night mode is clearly better on the A54. The A34 is brighter, but also softer. It loses detail and sharpness, but the A54 doesn't. For photos, I can easily say that the A54 has a significant edge over the A34. So if you're huge in photos, I suggest you go with the A54. But what about video? Well, it's the same story. They both shoot up to 4K on the rear and selfie cameras, which is impressive, but the stabilization is much better on the A54 than on the A34 at 4K. But if you want really good stabilization, you can still shoot at 1080p using super steady mode. Color, dynamic range, detail is spot on the A54, but the A34 struggles in some certain situations. So just like with photos, it puts up a good fight, but isn't as consistent as the A54. Battery life is basically identical on both, 5000 mAh, and they both support 25 watts of quote-unquote fast charging. As you can tell from the packaging, the 25-watt charger is sold separately. I was averaging between 6 to 8 hours of screen on time on both. I would say the A34 is slightly ahead in battery life, but it's not so significant. They both do decently well. At the end of the day, these phones are not too far apart. They're also so similar in a lot of things. They're both IP67 rated, they both have Gorilla Glass 5 protection, both are 1080p 120Hz AMOLED displays, both have an always on display, which wasn't the case last year. They also both have a 5000 mAh battery, they both get 4 years of major Android updates, Both are 5G devices, and these are just a few. And in the areas where they're not identical, the difference isn't night and day. So what's the conclusion? Well, you should go with the A54 if you want the best phone. Or if you want the better looking flagship-esque phone, you want the better camera, and I think most importantly, you can easily afford it. But if you're not too bothered about looks or these slightly inconsistent photos, or you're on a tighter budget, or perhaps you want the phone with the most value for the money you're paying, then yes, go with the A34. And you could use that extra cash to maybe buy a charger. The A54 is better, we said that at the very beginning, but does the extra features of the A54 speak to you? And are you willing to pay $100 or $150 for it? I think that's where the decision would be made. Me personally would go with the A54, but what about you? Let's chat in the comments. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I'll see you when you see me.